Imagine this. You're locked inside a cage, stripped of everything. Your freedom, your dignity, your future. But there's one thing keeping you sane. One person on the outside who promised to wait. The woman you married. The woman who swore those vows meant something. Now imagine discovering that the person she's been spending time with, the person she's been sharing her secrets with, her body with, is the same man who holds the keys to your cell every single day. The man you're forced to respect. The man who controls whether you eat, sleep, or see the sun. How far can love survive behind bars? And what happens when the person you trust most shatters your heart in the darkest place on earth? This is the story of Michael, a man who lost everything twice. Once when the judge's gavel fell, and once when his wife fell into the arms of the man who was supposed to keep order. By the time the truth came out, 2 people were dead, and nothing would ever be the same. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Michael Hayes wasn't supposed to end up in prison. At least, that's what he told himself every morning when he woke up on that thin, hard mattress in his cell at Redwood State Correctional Facility. He was 32 years old when the sentence came down. 8 years for aggravated assault. It wasn't murder. It wasn't drugs. It was a bar fight that went too far, a man who didn't get back up, and a courtroom that didn't care about his side of the story. Michael wasn't a bad man. He had a temper, sure. He made mistakes, but he wasn't evil. He was just broken. And prison was supposed to fix that, or at least that's what the system claimed. But prisons don't fix people. They just freeze them in time, strip them down to their bones, and wait to see what's left when the years are done. For Michael, what kept him going wasn't hope of freedom. It was Sarah, his wife, the woman who sat in that courtroom every single day during his trial, her eyes red and swollen, her hand over her heart like she was trying to hold it together with sheer will. Sarah was 28 when Michael was convicted. She had blonde hair that fell just past her shoulders, blue eyes that always looked a little sad even when she smiled, and a voice that could calm him down even when the world was on fire. She worked as a nurse at a community clinic, long shifts, low pay, but she loved helping people. That's who she was, a helper, a fixer, someone who believed in second chances, and she believed in Michael. In those first few months, Sarah visited every week. She'd sit across from him in the visiting room, hands pressed flat against the glass or folded on the table between them, and she'd talk about everything. About her day, about their dog, Bailey, about the apartment they used to share and how empty it felt without him. She'd tell him she missed him, that she was waiting, that when he got out they'd start over, go somewhere new, maybe have kids, live the life they were supposed to have before everything fell apart. And Michael held on to those words like a lifeline. He replayed them in his head at night when the cell felt too small and the silence too loud. He imagined her voice, her laugh, the way she used to curl up next to him on the couch with her head on his chest. That's what got him through the first year, the belief that someone out there still loved him, that he wasn't forgotten, that he still mattered. But there was someone else in this story. Someone who would change everything. His name was Daniel Crowe, and he was a corrections officer at Redwood, 41 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a face that always looked just a little too serious. Daniel had been working in the prison system for almost 15 years. He wasn't cruel. He didn't abuse his power, at least not in the obvious ways. He followed the rules, kept order, treated inmates fairly for the most part. He was respected by his colleagues and feared, in a quiet way, by the men inside. But Daniel had something most people didn't see: loneliness. He'd been divorced for 6 years, no kids, no close family. He lived alone in a small house on the edge of town, spent his weekends watching football or working on his truck, and went to bed every night in a silence that felt heavier than it should. Daniel didn't talk about it, didn't complain. But the emptiness was there, like a weight pressing down on his chest, and over time, it started to hollow him out. When Sarah first walked into that visiting room, Daniel noticed her. Of course he did. Everyone noticed her. She stood out, not just because she was beautiful, but because she seemed real, genuine. Not like the other visitors who came in angry or desperate or checked out. Sarah came in with hope. And that hope was something Daniel hadn't seen in a long time. At first, he didn't think much of it. She was just another inmate's wife, another face in the crowd. But over time, as the months passed and Sarah kept coming back, week after week, Daniel started to pay attention. He noticed the way she smiled at Michael even when her eyes looked tired, the way she held herself together even when you could see the cracks forming. He noticed that she came alone. No friends, no family, just her. And slowly, without realizing it, he started to feel something. Sympathy maybe, or curiosity, or something deeper, something he shouldn't have felt. But feelings don't ask for permission, they just show up. And by the time Daniel realized what was happening, it was already too late. The first year inside felt like 10. Michael counted every day, every hour. He marked them off on a calendar he kept hidden under his mattress, each X a small reminder that time was moving, even if it didn't feel like it. The routine was suffocating. Wake up at 6, eat breakfast that tasted like cardboard, work in the laundry room folding sheets that smelled like bleach and sweat. Lunch, yard time if the weather allowed it, dinner, lockdown, repeat, day after day after day. The only break in the monotony was Sarah's visits. But something started to change around the 18-month mark. It was subtle at first. She still came every week, but the conversations felt different, shorter, less personal. She'd talk about work more, about how exhausted she was, how the clinic was understaffed and she was picking up extra shifts just to pay the bills. Michael understood. He did. But there was something in her voice. Something distant, like she was talking to him from the other side of a canyon and her words weren't quite reaching him. He tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself it was just stress, that she was tired, that it didn't mean anything. But then the visits started to stretch out. Every week became every other week, then every 3 weeks. The letters, which used to come almost daily, slowed to a trickle. One every 2 weeks, then one a month. And when they did come, they were short. A few lines about her day, a generic "I miss you" at the end. No depth, no emotion. Just words. Michael started to panic, not in an obvious way. He didn't yell or break things. He just withdrew. He'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying their last conversation in his head, searching for clues. Did she sound different? Did she look at him the same way? Was there something she wasn't saying? He wanted to ask her directly, but every time he tried, the words got stuck in his throat, because asking meant admitting he was scared, and admitting he was scared meant admitting he might be losing her. And if he was losing her, then what did he have left? The other inmates noticed. They always did. Prison has a way of stripping away every facade, every layer of pretense, until all that's left is the raw, vulnerable truth. And Michael's truth was written all over his face. One night, during rec time, a guy named Tony, who'd been inside for 6 years on a drug charge, sat down next to Michael in the common area. Tony was in his 40s, wiry, with a shaved head and a scar running down his left cheek. He wasn't a bad guy, just someone who'd made bad choices and was paying for them. He looked at Michael for a long moment, then said quietly, "She's pulling away, isn't she?" Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. Tony nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've seen it before, man. It happens. Time does that to people. You're in here, she's out there, and the world keeps spinning. She's got her life, bills to pay, problems to deal with. And you're just a voice on the phone, a face behind glass. Eventually, that's not enough." Michael clenched his jaw. She's not like that, she promised. Tony sighed. They all promise, brother. They mean it too. At first. But promises are easy when you're sitting in a courtroom holding hands. It's a lot harder when it's been 2 years and there's still 6 more to go. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm saying she's human. And humans, they get lonely. Those words haunted Michael. Because deep down, he knew Tony was right. Sarah was lonely. He could hear it in her voice during their phone calls, in the pauses between her sentences, in the way she'd sometimes sigh and say, "I'm fine," when he knew she wasn't. But what could he do? He was trapped, helpless. He couldn't hold her, couldn't comfort her, couldn't be the husband she needed. All he could do was wait and hope that she'd keep waiting too. But hope is a fragile thing. And with every missed visit, every shorter letter, every strained phone call, it started to crack. By the time Michael hit the 2-year mark, the distance between them felt insurmountable. It wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, psychological. She was slipping away, and no matter how hard he tried to hold on, he could feel her letting go. Sarah didn't plan for it to happen. That's what she told herself later, in the moments when guilt would creep in and she'd stare at herself in the mirror, wondering who she'd become. She didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray her husband. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't malicious. It just happened, slowly, quietly, like a crack in a dam that starts as a hairline fracture and eventually breaks open, flooding everything. It started with small conversations. Officer Crowe, Daniel, was always around during her visits. He'd check her in, walk her through security, sometimes stand nearby while she sat with Michael. At first, they didn't talk much, just the usual pleasantries. "How are you today, Mrs. Hayes?" "Fine, thank you." "Okay, you're all set. Have a good visit." But over time, those exchanges grew longer. One day, after a particularly hard visit where Michael seemed more distant than usual, Sarah walked out of the visiting room with tears in her eyes. She tried to hide it, kept her head down, but Daniel saw. He always saw. He approached her gently. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "Yeah, I'm fine, just, it's hard sometimes, you know?" Daniel hesitated, then said quietly, "I can imagine. This place, it takes a toll on everyone, not just the men inside." Something about the way he said it, the softness in his voice, made Sarah pause. She looked up at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't professional detachment. It was empathy, understanding, maybe even loneliness. From that day on, their conversations became more frequent. Sarah would linger a little longer after her visits, and Daniel would find excuses to talk to her. About the weather, about how traffic was getting worse, about nothing important really. But it felt important, because for Sarah, those few minutes talking to someone who actually seemed to care, who listened without judgment, who didn't need anything from her, it was a relief. It was a break from the crushing weight of being strong all the time. And for Daniel, talking to Sarah filled a void he didn't even realize was there. She made him feel something. Something other than the monotony of his days. Something other than loneliness. It was innocent at first. Or at least, that's what they both told themselves. But intentions don't matter much when lines start to blur. When Sarah mentioned one day that her car was making a strange noise, and she didn't know who to take it to, Daniel offered to take a look. "I'm pretty good with cars," he said with a small smile. "I could check it out after your next visit if you want." She hesitated. It felt strange, but also kind, and she was so tired of doing everything alone. So she said yes. A week later, after her visit with Michael, Daniel met her in the parking lot. He popped the hood, poked around for a few minutes, tightened something, and told her it should be fine, but to keep an eye on it. Sarah thanked him profusely. "I really appreciate this. I don't know what I would have done." Daniel shrugged. "It's nothing. Really. But it wasn't nothing, because that small act of kindness opened a door. And once a door is open, it's hard to close it again. The next time Sarah visited, Daniel asked if she wanted to grab coffee afterward. "There's a diner down the road," he said casually. "I'm off shift in 20 minutes. Figured you might want to decompress a bit before the drive home." She should have said no. She knew that. But she was exhausted, drained, and the thought of sitting alone in her apartment, replaying the awkward, stilted conversation she'd just had with Michael, it was too much. So she said yes. They sat in a booth at the back of the diner, drinking bad coffee and talking about everything except the prison. Sarah talked about her job, about a difficult patient she'd had that week, about how she used to want to be a doctor but never had the money for med school. Daniel talked about his ex-wife, about how the divorce had blindsided him, about how he sometimes wondered if he'd ever feel connected to anyone again. It felt easy, natural, like they'd known each other for years instead of months. And when Sarah drove home that night, she felt lighter, less alone, less crushed by the weight of everything. She told herself it was just coffee, just a conversation, nothing wrong with that. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew it was more than that. Because when she thought about her day, the part that made her smile wasn't the visit with Michael. It was the hour she'd spent sitting across from Daniel, laughing at something stupid he'd said, feeling like herself again. And that was the beginning of the end. Over the next few months, the coffee meetups became regular. Once every couple of weeks, then once a week, then twice a week. They'd talk for hours about anything and everything, and Sarah would drive home feeling guilty but also alive. She knew it was wrong. She knew she was crossing a line. But she couldn't stop. Because for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel like she was drowning. And Daniel knew it was wrong too. He knew the rules, knew the consequences. But he was tired of being alone, tired of going home to an empty house and an empty bed. And Sarah made him feel needed, wanted, human. So he ignored the voice in his head that told him to stop, ignored the policies and the ethics and the fact that she was married to an inmate under his watch. He just let it happen. And one night, after too many cups of coffee and too many shared secrets, it went further. They were sitting in his truck in the diner parking lot talking, and there was a pause, a moment of silence where everything felt suspended, and then Sarah leaned in. And Daniel didn't pull away. They kissed, soft at first, then desperate, like two people starving for connection and finally finding it. When they pulled apart, Sarah's eyes were filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have." Daniel shook his head. Don't apologize." But she should have. Because that kiss changed everything. And there was no going back now. Michael didn't find out right away. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It creeps in quietly, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you. For months, Sarah and Daniel were careful. They met outside the prison, never talked about it inside, never gave anyone a reason to suspect. But prisons are small worlds, and in small worlds, secrets don't stay buried for long. It started with a comment. Another inmate named Jimmy, who worked in the administrative wing, mentioned to Michael one day that he'd seen Officer Crowe talking to Sarah after a visit. "They were standing real close," Jimmy said with a smirk. "Looked pretty cozy if you ask me." Michael brushed it off. "She's just being polite, that's how she is." But the seed was planted, and once it was there, it started to grow. Michael began paying closer attention. He noticed that Daniel always seemed to be the one checking Sarah in, always the one nearby during their visits. And when Michael asked Sarah about it casually, she got defensive. "Why are you asking me that? He's just doing his job, Michael." "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just asking." Well, it sounds like you're accusing me. And that response, that defensiveness, it told Michael everything he needed to know. Because innocent people don't get defensive, they get confused or concerned, but not defensive. He started asking around, quietly, carefully. And the more he asked, the more whispers he heard. That Officer Crowe and Sarah had been seen together outside the prison, that they'd been spotted at a diner, that someone's cousin who worked at a gas station down the road had seen them sitting in a truck together, talking and laughing like they were more than just acquaintances. Michael felt like he was losing his mind. He wanted to believe it wasn't true. Wanted to believe that the woman he loved, the woman who'd promised to wait, wouldn't do that to him. But the evidence kept piling up, and the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that he couldn't confront her. Not yet. Because what if he was wrong? What if it was all just rumors and coincidences and his own paranoia eating him alive? But then came the night that confirmed everything. Michael had a friend on the outside, a guy named Eric who he'd known since high school. Eric wasn't involved in anything illegal anymore, but he still had connections. And when Michael called him during one of his weekly phone privileges and asked him to look into it, Eric agreed. 2 weeks later, Eric called back. His voice was heavy. Mike, I don't know how to tell you this, man, but it's true. I saw them, together, at a restaurant on the west side of town. They weren't just talking, bro. They were holding hands, kissing. I'm sorry. Michael's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. His chest felt like it was caving in. His throat closed up. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Eric kept talking, but Michael didn't hear the words. All he could hear was the rushing in his ears, the pounding of his heart, the sound of his entire world collapsing. He hung up, walked back to his cell in a daze, sat down on his bunk, and stared at the wall. That night Michael didn't sleep, he just sat there, replaying every conversation he'd had with Sarah over the past year, every visit, every letter, every phone call, and he realized the signs had been there all along. The distance, the vagueness, the way she stopped saying I love you as much, the way she stopped talking about their future. She'd been pulling away because she'd already left. She just hadn't told him yet. The rage came slowly at first, a low simmer in his gut that gradually built into a roaring fire. How could she do this? How could she betray him like this? He was stuck in here because of one bad decision, one moment of anger that he couldn't take back, and she was out there living her life, moving on, falling into the arms of another man. And not just any man. The man who was supposed to uphold the law. The man who was supposed to maintain order. The man who had power over him every single day. It was humiliating, degrading, infuriating. Michael wanted to scream, wanted to punch something, wanted to tear the world apart. But he couldn't, so he just waited. Waited for the next visit, waited for the chance to look her in the eyes and see the truth. And when that day came, everything fell apart. The visiting room was crowded that Saturday afternoon. Families huddled around tables, hands clasped, voices low. Children squirmed in their seats, bored and restless. Guards stood along the walls watching with detached indifference. And in the middle of it all, Michael sat across from Sarah, his hands folded on the table, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Sarah could tell something was wrong the moment she saw him. His eyes, they were different. Colder, harder, empty. Michael, she said softly, are you okay? He didn't answer right away, just stared at her. Really stared, like he was seeing her for the first time, or maybe seeing her for what she really was. Michael, you're scaring me. What's wrong? He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and controlled. I know. Her face went pale. You know what? Don't, he said quietly. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about. Sarah's breath hitched. Her hands started to tremble. Michael, I don't. Officer Crowe, Michael said, his voice shaking now. You've been seeing him, haven't you? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her eyes filled with tears. And that was all the confirmation he needed. How long? Michael asked, his voice breaking. How long have you been sleeping with him? Michael, please. How long, Sarah? She looked down at her hands. A few months. A few months. The words hit him like a sledgehammer. A few months. While he was rotting in here, counting down the days, holding on to the hope that she still loved him. She'd been with someone else. Why? He whispered. Why would you do this to me? Sarah's tears spilled over. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely, Michael. I was so lonely. You're in here and I'm out there and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. So you cheated, Michael said flatly. With him. With the man who locks me in a cage every night. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Sarah? Tell me. Help me understand how you could do this. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I still care about you. I do. But I can't keep waiting. I can't put my life on hold for 6 more years. I need someone who's here. Someone who can hold me. Someone who's present. And he's present, Michael said bitterly. The man who's supposed to enforce the rules, the man who swore an oath, he's present. Sarah didn't answer. She just cried. And Michael felt something inside him snap. Not just anger, not just betrayal. Something deeper. Something broken. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. We're done, he said. Do you hear me? We're done. Sarah reached for him. Michael, wait. But he was already walking away, walking back toward the door where the guards were waiting. And as he walked, he saw him, Officer Crowe, standing near the entrance, watching. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Michael saw it. The guilt, the shame, but also something else. Defiance. Like Daniel knew what he'd done was wrong but didn't regret it. And that was the final straw. Michael didn't think, didn't plan. He just acted. He changed direction mid-stride, moving toward Daniel instead of the exit. The other guards noticed immediately and stepped forward, but Michael was faster. He closed the distance in seconds, his fists clenched, his vision tunneling until all he could see was the man who'd destroyed his life. You son of a... Michael swung. His fist connected with Daniel's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Alarms blared. Guards rushed in, grabbing Michael, pulling him back. He fought them, screaming, thrashing, every ounce of rage and pain and heartbreak pouring out in one explosive moment. How could you? Michael roared. How could you do this to me? Daniel wiped blood from his lip, his expression unreadable. He didn't fight back, didn't say a word, just stood there and took it. And that silence, that refusal to engage, it made Michael even angrier. The guards dragged him out of the visiting room down the hall and threw him into solitary confinement. Michael didn't care. He welcomed it. Because at least in solitary, he didn't have to pretend anymore. Didn't have to hold it together. He could just break. And that's exactly what he did. 3 weeks in solitary confinement changes a man. The isolation, the silence, the endless hours alone with your thoughts. It strips you down to your core, forces you to confront every fear, every insecurity, every ounce of pain you've been trying to bury. For Michael, those 3 weeks were a descent into darkness. He replayed the confrontation over and over in his mind. Sarah's tears, her excuses, the way she'd admitted it so casually, like their marriage meant nothing, like he meant nothing. And Daniel, that smug, silent bastard who'd stood there and taken the punch like he was some kind of martyr, like he was the victim. Michael's rage festered, grew, consumed him, until it was all he could think about, all he could feel. When they finally let him out of solitary, Michael was different, quieter, more focused. The other inmates noticed. They gave him space. Even Tony, who usually had something to say about everything, kept his distance. Because there was something in Michael's eyes now. Something cold and hard and dangerous. Michael started planning. Not consciously at first, just thinking about how he could make them pay, how he could hurt them the way they'd hurt him. He knew he couldn't get to Sarah. She was on the outside, untouchable. But Daniel was right here, every single day, walking the halls, giving orders, pretending like nothing had happened. And that was intolerable. Michael started watching Daniel, learning his routines, when he worked, where he went, who he talked to. And the more he watched, the more he realized how easy it would be. Because Daniel had gotten comfortable, complacent. He thought the worst was over, thought Michael had cooled down, thought he was safe. He was wrong. The opportunity came during a prison event, a small gathering in the common area to celebrate the anniversary of some rehabilitative program. Inmates, guards, a few administrators, everyone mingling, talking, pretending like they were one big, happy family. It was laughable. Michael kept to himself, standing near the back, watching, waiting. He saw Daniel across the room, talking to another officer, laughing at some joke. And something inside Michael snapped. Not violently, not explosively, just quietly.